رب زدنا علما ولا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. The topic for this late afternoon is the other side of freedom, and it was intended for a young audience of ages between 12 and 18, and I see, mashallah, many more young people between approximately those ages. So welcome to all of you, inshallah ta'ala, and it is a pleasure being with this extended young audience. And freedom, the other side of freedom. What is freedom first? What is the meaning of the word freedom? Some say, when you look at the dictionary in the English cultural language, freedom is to not be under the control of another. They also say freedom is to think and do and say as one pleases. Freedom, they say, is not to be restrained enough by manners and morals. Now, having said this, let us continue further and, of course, address this from a perspective of a Muslim. What this definition of freedom entitles, and what does it imply as well? First of all, this definition gives us an idea of when we speak of being free, we need to identify something else. Being free from what? Those definitions tells us, for example, it is to be free from the, if you will, the guidance of manners and morals. Free is to be free from being accountable to another. Free is not to be accountable to in one's speeches, in one's words, in one's thoughts, in one's actions, not to be accountable to anything else. Now, this is freedom of self. I am free as an entity. Is it freedom of self or is it freedom from self? Because when we speak of freedom, and freedom from what? One way is freedom from the self or freedom of the self. In the first case, freedom from self, and now I connect it to what we have shared with each other yesterday and today, freedom from self, that is, I am not held in bondage by my nafs. I am free from the bondage and the yokes and the chains of the self. And that nafs, remember we have learned, could be either a bahimi nafs, or a sab'i nafs, or a shaytani nafs. A cattle-like nafs, self, or a predatory self, or a shaitan-like self. If I am not to account, if I don't reckon with, if I don't have to be restrained, if I am free from this type of self, then we have learned and we have established that that is indeed freedom, because that freedom leads to an elation inside your chest, leads to a happiness, a true happiness in this life, and most importantly as Muslims in Akhirah, obviously. But freedom of self, that is, my nafs is free from restrictions and from accountabilities. That freedom is in a sense the freedom that was just mentioned a moment ago in the definition that you find in some dictionaries. That's the definition, that's the freedom of the self. So the self, the nafs, is free from accounting to the norms of manners and to the norms of morals. I have a self that is free. Free from manners, free from morals, free from ethical standards. A nafs that is satisfied in whatever it asks for. And it could ask for eating and sleeping and copulating and drinking and more of that. And whenever it asks for it, under whatever conditions for it to be really free, it must get what it wants. And that's the freedom of a cow. Again, we go back to that. That's the freedom of a cow. That's the freedom of a goat. Young people who are here, all of you are young, mashallah, but those even younger people, if I asked you, do you want to be a goat? Do you want to be a camel? Of course, all of these studious and intelligent young people will respond to me, not at all. I do not want to be a goat. I do not want to be a cow. I do not want to be a llama. I want to be human. And then I ask you, if you don't want to be a goat and you don't want to be free like a goat, then you should not let the reins of your nafs free to eat what your nafs wants to eat, to drink what your nafs wants to drink, to sleep when your nafs wants to sleep, and to copulate. That is a polite word for sexual relationships. And to copulate when your nafs wants to copulate. So if you don't want to be a goat, then don't be free like a goat and like a cow. If I want to be free like a tiger, tiger is nice. If I want to be free like a hyena, the same family of predators, then I must be free like a hyena. And free like a hyena means also I have the freedom when I want to usurp territory when I want, to attack when I want, to steal when I want, to belittle when I want, and to extend territory the way I want, and disregard the rights of the territorial rights of others, for instance. If I want to be free like a hyena, then that's another side of freedom. If I ask you, do you want to be a tiger? Some person who envisages a tiger as this courageous, beautiful animal would say, yes, I want to be like a tiger. But I say, do you want to be like a tiger, the predator? And I mean by that, the hyena tiger. Of course, he or she will reply, no, I don't want to be a hyena. Then if you don't want to be free like a hyena, do not make your priorities like those of a hyena. And so on. So there is that freedom of that self, of that nafs. Which type of nafs do I have? Therefore determines what type of freedom I enjoy. And how I define freedom depends on my inner state of my nafs. What self do I have? Again, if I have the self of a cow, or the self of a hyena, or the self of a shaitan, then my freedom is determined and identified by what makes a hyena, or a cow, or a shaitan happy. Because freedom is supposed to make us happy, not miserable. Now, if I am free from my nafs, from myself, then that freedom indeed implies that I am not going to be held down and lowered and held in bondage by the dictates of a nafs, a self that is either cattle-like or predatory or shaitani. Then I am indeed exalted to a higher level. I want to be free like an angel. I want to be free like an angel. Truly free. Free from the bondage of materialism. free from the bondage of attachment to earth. Earth is lower, heaven is higher. And the more I like to eat and drink and sleep and copulate and entertain myself like a hyena or like a cow, the more I am held down to the level of earth. And the more I liberate from myself from those, I am exalted to the level of the heavenly creatures. What freedom do I want? Freedom from what?